All right, Buff fans, we're continuing with our opponent previews, and we're going to talk about the Wyoming Cowboys today. And I'm excited to have Alex Taylor, who covers Wyoming for wyosports.com, which you were telling me really kind of covers about four different newspapers, which is the way the newspaper world works these days. And, I always say Boulder Daily Camera, but really my stuff goes in several papers as well. So, yeah, you probably just write and like wherever it appears, right?
Yeah, pretty much. It's kind of split between Laramie and Cheyenne, but yeah, I just turned my story in, and it ends up where it ends up.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you've been covering the Cowboys for a couple of years now, and you got some good perspective coming off of last year. And they didn't have a great year under Jay Saville that first year, but the little bit I know about them, it looks like they're expecting a better year this year. I mean, what's your? We'll go into some more stuff, but just your general assessment right off the bat. Like, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the more time that goes by, obviously, the more time you have to process things in retrospect. And I think Jay Salvell had a very uh, rich learning experience. That he those first year head coach. I mean, obviously, he was a DC. He's been a DC forever. Was under Craig Bull,
Mhm.
longtime Wyoming coach for about half of his tenure. So I think really last year you kind of saw I don't want to say hesitancy, but there was definitely. And he would tell you right now that he kind of let some things slide leadership wise that will not be the standard for this program going forward. I mean, obviously, you kind of saw that with there was a couple coaching changes that he made at wide receiver, defensive tackle. He didn't retain a couple coaches there, and obviously there was some players that he hasn't named, obviously, but there was some leadership expectations that were not fulfilled. Just in that regard, I mean, there was players did not play up to their expectation just in terms of being a team captain or being a leader and leading the younger guys. I mean, that just wasn't happening last year. And obviously,
Yeah,
when you start 1-7, 0-4, whatever it was, I mean, you're gonna lose some guys in the process, like sure. But I think you kind of saw at the end of the year. I've been saying this a couple of times. I think so. Caden Anderson, their quarterback, when he got hurt against Boise State, I think it was their second to last drive in the first half. I mean, I think that was a tie game, like 7-7 or something like that. And
yeah,
you almost wonder if Boise State has that playoff berth if Caden Anderson doesn't get hurt because that looked like a pretty winnable game. They gave Boise State all it could handle in their home finale, and then they turned around, beat Washington State, who was also before their three-game skid there, they were in the college football playoff conversation as well. So I think
yeah,
momentum-wise, they have something going for them just in terms of how they ended the year and some of that roster turnover. I know fans like to look at guys leaving as a bad thing, but sometimes when you go 3-9, you got to change some things up. So I think they have some things to look forward to in that department for sure.
yeah. And I'm sure Jay. I mean, like every coach, you learn a lot your first time as a head coach, and year two should be better than year one. And I think he and most coaches would say that, right? And so
Yeah.
I would expect this year to be a little bit better. Let's start on offense because you mentioned Caden Anderson and young guy that things did change a little bit last year when he got in there. It was like they finally got him in the lineup, and it was like, whoa, okay, there's a little bit of offense going on here. And so,
Yeah.
um, what have you seen from him as far as like spring ball and like the growth he's shown and just what he gained out of last year?
Yeah, I think he's a guy that I mean, I kind of jokingly asked Salvo, I was like, how much has he kind of blossomed here as a leader this spring? And I mean, obviously he just said bluntly, like he was not a leader last year. He wasn't asked to be a leader. He was third on the depth chart going into last year. And obviously they rode Evan Savoda for I think 8 games, or seven and a half games basically. And Jaden Clemens, their other backup last year, just left the program kind of midway through the year. So he kind of got thrust into that. And I don't think if you would have asked Salvo in fall camp last year, hey, you're going to have Caden Anderson starting at the end of the year, he probably wouldn't believe you. But
Yeah,
then obviously he goes and he was Mountain West Freshman of the Week, and that obviously that game against New Mexico. But just in terms of my expectations, I mean, I'm kind of I just don't want to put the cart before the horse, I guess, or but because really New Mexico, I think we were bottom 3, bottom 5 in the country defensively, and
yeah,
then
yeah,
you go and he kind of struggled. The whole offense struggled against Colorado State in Fort Collins, and then he got hurt against Boise State. So the sample size is very small, but just in terms of leadership, I think that's kind of you're able to see those intangibles a little more with Salvo opening up all these spring practices. So like we were able to watch. So the accuracy and obviously you don't know what it's going to look like in a game per se, but I
Yeah.
think just leadership wise, he's taken a big step there, and I think he's got the guys rallying behind him, which is what you want in a guy who's going into his sophomore year.
Yeah. Uh, Offensively, not a very good team last year. Averaged less than 20 points per game, but there's some guys coming back. I mean, running back and receiver. Talk about some of those weapons around Caden. Like, what does he have to work with that maybe makes you think, or maybe it doesn't think, maybe you don't think that the offense can be better this year.
Yeah, I think a big one last year. I mean, injuries were a killer on both sides of the ball, obviously,
Mhm.
and it's but John Michael Gillenborg, tight end. I mean, when you
Yeah.
talking to these coaches, I mean that's they're expecting him to be drafted. That's just if he can stay healthy and have a full productive year doing what they know he can do. I mean, he's been drawing a lot of comparisons to Trey McBride, Colorado State.
Hmm.
Just very athletic. I think that's a dude that Salvo has kind of said like, hey, he needs the ball. Like he
Yeah.
needs 8 targets, 10 targets a game. So you kind of pair that with Jalen Sargent, wide receiver on the outside, and then Chris Durr Jr., who is also going to his sophomore year in the slot. I think those two should be 1, 2, well, 1, 2, 3, all three of those guys in
Right.
terms of targets. And then you like obviously those guys returning offensive line. They got all three interior guys are returning starters. So Wes King, Jack Walsh is sliding over to center, and then Caden Barnett's sliding over to right guard. So three guys that have all played, all started all right in the middle of the offensive line, and then obviously they got some question marks at both tackle spots, but that was kind of the part of the struggle last year was just it wasn't one thing. Like a lot of guys, you
Mhm.
obviously point at the quarterback and you say, "Wow, they can't pass the ball." Well, they also couldn't run, they couldn't block, and they couldn't get open. So
Yeah.
it's not a very good recipe for success in college football. So I think they're taking strides, but like you said, I mean the returning core of guys the guys that you wanted back, like kind of what I
Yeah.
mentioned earlier. I think Salvell said he had a list of top 10 guys that he wanted back. I think he said 8 or 9 of them are back. So I think
Yeah.
just the quality of retention
Mhm.
is more important than the quantity, obviously, in today's world.
And I know a little bit I know of him. I mean, he wants to run the ball more. He wants to get more out of that ground game. Sam Scott's back, right?
Yep.
They also add a couple backs in the portal. Does it look like that ground game is going to be better and a little bit be able to help out that passing offense a little bit more?
Yeah, I think so. And I wrote a story a couple weeks ago. I mean, they've been on downward trajectory just in terms of rushing yards per game the last 4 years. So I think
Yeah.
that's something that they're obviously targeting. And when you think of Wyoming football, you think of good defense and running the ball. And I
Yeah.
think obviously Salvell's kind of recognized that you're going to have to take the pressure off of Caden Anderson in that way. And I think they have the tools. I know Teron Kelman's a guy that I think if the season started today, he would probably be the starting running back. But I don't think Salvell's kind of mentioned like the days of the Ashton Genties are kind of dwindling. And I think
Yeah.
they're going to go away from, oh, this RB1's going to run it 30 times. Like I think they're going to try and do more of a committee. And they brought in a couple guys, North Texas guy and then an Iowa guy. They brought in, I think, 3 running backs after the spring game. So obviously we didn't get to see them compete in Laramie,
Right.
but I'm
Hmm.
curious where they kind of fall into the rotation when fall camp starts. Because like you said, Sam Scott missed the spring, so you don't know how that affects him just in terms of playing time or where he's at in the rotation. But he should be in the conversation just based off of what he did last year in the running game and in the passing game, and he's a great blocker. So a
Yeah.
lot of question marks there, but I know Gary Harrell, obviously former CU coach, is now Wyoming's running back coach. He got hired Wyoming's running back coach quit the first day of spring ball and took a job at Washington State literally the day that they started spring camp. And
Yeah.
so Gary Harrell was sitting on his couch and they called him. And so he kind of was late to the process of getting to know these guys, but
Yeah.
I'm sure that'll look a lot more established, I guess, when fall camp starts next month.
Yeah, well, I know Buff fans are not against CU, but I know they're rooting for Coach Flea, as he's known. Popular guy around here. I mean, a good guy, and so hopefully you can get those running backs going. But defensively, from what I'm looking, I mean, there's only really one full-time starter back on defense,
Yeah.
right? And that's Ben Florentine. And so there's a lot of changes on defense. You mentioned, Wyoming's known for kind of defense, but what do you think of that group? I mean, how can that group come together with so many new starters and new faces there?
Yeah, I think Tice Westland I would also throw in there. He didn't start really until the end of the year, but I would classify him as a returning starter just
Yeah,
based off of the experience of the last 2 years. But him and Florentine, I mean, those are you got nine new guys on defense, and a lot of those, a lot of their struggles last year. I mentioned the injuries, but Salvell mentioned those injuries to the first team guys brought to light kind of a recruiting gap over the last
yeah,
3, 4 years where you basically missed an entire class of safeties that were no longer in the program. Like they just didn't work out for whatever reason
right.
and never got replaced. So that was this secondary is going to be a huge question mark. And they're all going to be new starters, transfers, whatever it is. So that's kind of an interesting um, dilemma, I guess, going into the year. Normally, like Wyoming is kind of 2, 3, 4 year starters on defense. I mean, that's just not the case
Yeah,
anymore. So I think the biggest thing for me defensively is like Wyoming's reputation of being this great linebacker school. I mean, that wasn't the case last year, and that just
mhm,
that position they didn't get what they needed out of that position. They only play two linebackers, and so I think Salvell right now is in a position where he has, I'd say, 4 to 5 linebackers in the rotation, where last year, I mean, they might have had three.
yeah,
And
yeah,
that's a huge difference when you can rotate in two deep, even three deep at linebacker and not lose that much. And so I think Gary Rutherford's a name I'll throw out there. He's a redshirt freshman, but I would expect him to win one of the starting jobs, and if not, for sure be playing a lot as a reserve backup.
okay. So a lot of new faces there, and one guy that's gone, I want to ask you about because he's now in Colorado. Tyrekus Davis has been at Wyoming. What can Buff fans expect out of him as a player?
Yeah, he's a playmaker. He had a really good, really strong 2023 season. It kind of dropped off a little bit last year. I mean, obviously the whole defense did. But he was kind of one of those guys where I think he was a JUCO ruling, so we got the extra year of eligibility, and
Mhm.
they weren't expecting him to have that extra year. He was obviously supposed to be graduated, so I think they kind of just filled that position. And so obviously they kind of just parted ways that way. But he's a playmaker, man. He was probably their best corner 2 years ago. I'm not sure where he'll fall into Colorado's rotation that way, but he definitely has the ability to go out there and make the big play, which was something that Wyoming desperately needed defensively
Yeah,
last.
yeah. So overall, when you look at this team, I mean, they were fairly regularly in bowls under Craig Bowl.
Yeah.
Obviously last year slipped to 3-9. When you look at this schedule, you look at this team, um, Colorado game aside, just as a whole, is this a bowl team?
Yeah, I think I did a poll on Twitter. I think I said, what do you think is kind of the baseline? What would you consider a successful season for Wyoming after going
Yeah,
3-9? I think 70% said make it a bowl game. And I
yeah,
think when you look at the schedule, I mean, you play an Akron team that has a postseason ban week one. They lost to their FCS opponent last year, Idaho, at home. So they play Northern Iowa at home. You got to win that. And then obviously
mhm,
CU and Utah, they play Utah at home as well, and they're going to be underdogs in that. So I think if you can get out of the non-conference 2-2, I mean, I think in decent shape to get 4 wins, split your Mountain West schedule in one way or the other. And I don't know. I'm sure that we all know that preseason rankings are the authority for in media, but I
Yeah,
don't know where they're going to get picked. Probably not high, just based off of last year. But I don't know. I do think that I think their over under on the sports books is like 5.5, and I mean I just kind of based on their schedule, I think 6 wins is definitely obtainable. Like if they
yeah,
make the right steps on both sides of the ball, where they're not giving up 40 points a game and then only scoring 20, like that's, and you look at last year, and I know I'm not going to make excuses for this team. I mentioned the injuries, but like Arizona State, BYU ended up both being almost playoff teams. Obviously, Arizona State was a playoff team. North
yep,
Texas was top three, top five in the country in overall offense. And then obviously, like I said, they kind of took Boise State to the wire. There was, I think, four or five of their losses were one possession, one score losses. So I mean,
yeah,
it's really you're talking about a couple plays here and there. And it'll be an interesting year because this is Wyoming's obviously one of those teams that kind of got left behind in this conference realignment. So this is the last season of the Mountain West as it's currently constructed. So it would be kind of awesome to see one of these teams like New Mexico, Wyoming, all these teams that kind of got left behind to, make a one last statement before
yeah.
those other teams kind of depart to the Pac-12.
Right. I mean, it sounds like this Wyoming team, a lot of it could depend on, what's Caden Anderson's maturity, and his growth. And, those one score games obviously could be, you got better quarterback play, you turn around and win those games. And so that'll be interesting. And, Wyoming's first, the first time CU and Wyoming will play since 2009, and they're almost all the games are in Boulder. I don't remember the last time CU was in Laramie. So, but first time in 16 years. I know it's a fun front range game in my opinion. It's one that
Yeah.
I'd like to see more often. But our Wyoming fans, last thing I'll get you out of here, but like, are Wyoming fans excited to go to Boulder and face the Buffs for the first time in a while?
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of like you said. I would love to see more of these games. I think you're seeing that more with like Wyoming played BYU last year. They play
Hmm.
Utah this year. Just kind of getting into those old rivalry games, old
Yeah,
conference opponents like that. But I think CU is, I mean, I saw the games already sold out. This is kind of, there's not many games for Wyoming fans that are drivable. So
yeah,
I think that's obviously a huge luxury of it's basically Air Force, CSU, and Colorado. I mean, those are the three that are right there. So I think you're going to get a lot of Wyoming fans that way, just based on I don't know how many tickets will be available to Wyoming fans, but I think
yeah,
just I didn't know if I honestly that like at this time last year I didn't think that Coach Prime would still be there. So that I think that kind of throws an extra
yeah,
wrinkle into this, and obviously they're coming off successful season last year, so I think that kind of ups the ante a little bit just in terms of interest. And I'm sure this will be. Is it on prime time? Has it been?
that game has not been announced as far as the game
Yeah.
time.
Well, I'm curious. I mean,
Yeah,
that seems like an easy one that could be obviously nationally televised in one way or the other. So
that one's gonna be interesting because I was actually just talking to somebody about it yesterday over at CU, but because CU schedule, they've got a conference game week 3, and so the Wyoming game is week 4, but the rest of the Big 12 is in conference play, and so
yeah,
usually the conference play, those are announced like 12 days before, and
yeah,
so that's probably gonna, I would imagine like that's when this game is announced. Is it might be 12 days before, so it could depend on what the TV partners want to do, like what they pick for that opening
yeah.
weekend. So yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm not sure what they'll do with Wyoming with
Yeah,
that
I
game.
think kind of another wrinkle I was going to mention too. I think this game for CU falls right in between. So they start conference play. I think they play Houston,
Yeah, they visit Houston and then they play
and then
Wyoming,
they
and
play
then
Wyoming, and then
yeah,
they play BYU. So you
yeah,
kind of wonder. I don't like the term trap game, obviously, but you kind of wonder if that would be in Wyoming's favor of being sandwiched in between
yeah,
with the conference schedule starting so early now. If that could be at one point, I'm sure Salvo could use that as a talking point, I guess, going,
yeah.
going into
There's
the
a
game.
it's funny because those of us that analyze, I mean, there's all sorts of ways to analyze it, right?
Yeah,
And the one, one is like, well, the Houston game before is on a Friday night, so CU's got an extra day of prep before Wyoming, and
yeah.
Wyoming's got to play Utah, so they got a really tough, non-conference match ahead of time, and so who knows? I think it's one of those things that as coaches, the coaches would probably say, whatever, we just play the
Yeah,
game and get ready for it. But I think that it's a valid point. Like,
yeah.
it does drop in not the middle of conference play, but between conference games. And, um, that's an interesting point. And,
Yeah.
I think the fact that Wyoming's here for the first time in 16 years and
Yeah.
who knows how many of their fans are going to be in the building, but that should make it fun too.
Well, there's I don't have the number in front of me, but obviously Wyoming recruits Colorado pretty heavy.
Yeah.
I I'm sure I'll track them down going into that week, but I'm sure there's more than the handful that were felt snubbed by not getting recruited by Colorado. Obviously, the same thing
Yeah.
with Colorado State, but a lot of these guys in that Denver, Boulder, Fort Collins area end up going to Laramie. So that's
Yeah.
something to watch too.
Well, the kicker, what's the kicker? I knew it.
Sandvik.
No, Hoyland. No, Hoyland
Hoyland.
was the kicker of the last few years. Yeah.
Yeah, he's gone. He's
Yeah,
with the
yeah.
Ravens.
Yeah, yeah, it was a former kicker, I guess. He was from Legacy High School right
Yeah.
by Boulder, but yeah, the Stanvik is from Steamboat Springs, so I don't know. I don't know where he wanted to go growing up, but
Another interesting fact before we go off here, the kicker, that could be another interesting one. Sold out stadium. He'll have a couple attempts in by then, but has zero career field goal attempts in college. I think he has two attempts in his entire lifetime in a game. He was 1 for 2 in high school
wow.
in Colorado, and then he ended up going to a camp at Wyoming, and they signed him at this camp after he went like 10 for 10. But he was 1 for 2 in his high school career, and has never kicked in college. So
Wow. Well, I know Buff fans don't want that game to come down to a field goal, but if it does, that's something to put in your back pocket, some piece of knowledge there if it comes down to a field goal. So, Alex, I really appreciate it. It's been fun catching up with you, and we'll see you in Boulder week 4.
yeah, for sure, man. I appreciate it anytime.